Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, back with you after a couple of days off early in the week. And I just wanted to say before we dive deep into this that as we go through the training camp previews, as we go through training camp and all those things that we're going to get into, it's never going to feel like the right time to start moving on after Kyrie Jackson passed away last weekend. And it's never going to feel like it's appropriate to just have fun talking football after a tragedy like that. Training camp's coming up. It's what we do. They're going to play a season. And so we're going to do it. And I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. But just wanted to acknowledge that at the beginning here that Kyrie Jackson will be on everyone's mind, on the reporters, the coaches, the players, all season long, all throughout training camp. It will be something that does not just go away and we don't just get back to saying, hooray, football and so forth. So I wanted to say that before we start moving forward. But here we are. This is what we do. And there is a season to be played for the Vikings. So I wanted to start with the official training camp preview season with the part of the roster that has been really revamped the most, aside from the quarterback position, which is the front seven of the Minnesota Vikings, the defensive line, the outside linebackers, the inside linebackers. When you think about it, out of those seven, is it four, maybe even five new players when they're going to run out there for week one? Blake Cashman, Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, Jerry Tillery. These guys were all not here, and Tillery could end up having a significant role on this team. So there's a lot to go through. But something else that I noticed as well when it comes to the linebacker position and the outside linebacker position and really defensive line as well, but especially the linebackers, is that there are a lot of players who are undrafted free agents or late round picks that are going to have opportunities here to fight for jobs. So I wanted to go through all the positions with you guys and, of course, answer any questions or comments that you have, things going on in Viking land. If you watch the Netflix show Receiver with Justin Jefferson, if you got any thoughts on that, or I noticed JJ McCarthy was slightly featured in the Giants off-season Hard Knocks, or whatever. I guess it's off-season Hard Knocks that they're calling it. I haven't watched it, but I've seen a lot of the clips that have come out, including JJ McCarthy going through what a long play call Jim Harbaugh gave him, and Drake May crushing it on the board and so forth. So that's been kind of interesting to see what's come out of those things. But if you have questions, always very happy to answer them along the way, even if they're not about the front seven. Feel free to ask whatever you want to ask, and we'll have a good time chatting football. So I want to start right out with the inside linebackers, and we'll work our way forward. And I want to begin with last year at this very time. We were intrigued by Ivan Pace Jr. because during minicamp, Ivan Pace had gotten a handful of reps in the second team. And when an undrafted free agent even gets a little bit of action in the second team, you go, okay, well, what's going on with this guy? Is there something there? And then as training camp started to play out, I remember even just the moment where it started to turn for Ivan Pace. There was a practice right before the night practice where Pace got first team reps, and it did not appear that Brian Asamoah had been hurt. And then in the night practice, Pace took all the first team reps, and it started to become obvious that something was going on here. And then the more and more we got through the preseason games, training camp, the more plays that Ivan Pace made, the more evident that he was going to be the starter for this team. And it did win me a milkshake bet last year. You know, we have these silly kind of little milkshake bets within the beat. And I won that one because the bet was whether it was going to be Asamoah or Pace Jr. to start. And Ivan Pace not only started, but he had a tremendous year. He played 704 total snaps, and he finished ranking as PFF's 15th best linebacker last year. And one of the things that we do in football is once someone establishes themselves as being pretty good, we immediately decide that they're good and move on. Okay, Ivan Pace Jr., good. Who else is out there? What else do we got to look at? But carrying over what he did last year, now that teams have a little more information on Ivan Pace, how he plays, how they might be able to counter some of the things he does, it is now on him to establish himself as not just a nice story and a guy who made some really big plays for them and created some pressures, got the interception against the Raiders. But to establish himself as somewhere between very solid and star player for this Vikings defense, because as we try to look toward the future and talk about which pieces are going to be here for a long time, it's a big part of the evaluation to say this defense and this defensive roster is maybe a year away from being really, really good, but we are counting Ivan Pace as one of those players. This training camp, he will, I'm sure, stand out. So that's really a full season story. Is Ivan Pace going to take that next big step? But without Jordan Hicks here, he becomes a leader of this defense as a centerpiece, being a linebacker, and he may even call the defense. He may be the green dot. He's a major player, and his comfort in year two in the defense and how he looks in training camp is relevant. Definitely looked bigger to me physically, and not taller, but maybe stronger than he did last year coming in. So a big season for Ivan Pace, not necessarily a huge training camp, because we know that he can shine in the NFL. But Blake Cashman playing next to Ivan Pace and the chemistry that those two are able to create right away is a big story. And also the health of Blake Cashman. Cashman last year, he was tremendous. I mean, one of PFF's top linebackers in the entire league. He was one of the best run defenders. He was one of the best in coverage. And if he brings the same performance to Minnesota, you're talking about one of the best linebacker duos in the entire NFL. But one of the issues that Blake Cashman has had for his entire career is just staying healthy. And last year when he played, he was great, but he played, I believe, under 700 snaps. And there were times where he was a little bit banged up. And I think a major storyline from this position is, yes, the chemistry between those two. Can Brian Flores actually do more with Blake Cashman, because he is younger? He is a lot faster than where Jordan Hicks was. With all due respect to Jordan Hicks, as a great leader of last year's defense, Hicks was on the older side of his career, and at one point coming back from an injury so severe that he could have lost his leg. So that's not exactly the level of speed and quickness that Blake Cashman, as a tremendous athlete, brings to this group. Is there more that they can do? The Texans did not ask Blake Cashman to blitz very often, and we might see that Blake Cashman is going to blitz a lot more as a member of the Minnesota Vikings. Looking for any type of hints there between those two starters of how they look together, how much Blake Cashman might be able to blitz. Are they lining him up in some different spots and so forth, as Brian Flores likes to do? That we're going to find out. But for the inside linebackers, I think one of the biggest stories here is everything behind those two players. And this is where you guys might be less familiar, and why I like to do kind of the training camp deep dive into, oh yeah, these are the guys that you might or might not end up hearing about throughout the summer. One of them is a veteran linebacker, special teamer, Kamu Grugier-Hill. He's been around, played for a lot of different teams. He is not ranked very highly in terms of PFF grades. He's not somebody that you want to start for any extended period of time, but can start, and is largely a special teamer. So there's a depth, maybe drop off from in the past. Although Troy Dye, bringing back Anthony Barr, probably it's about the same. There's not a lot of depth at the linebacker position in the NFL. So they went out and got Kamu Grugier-Hill as a veteran who's been around. But one of the more notable players to watch in this training camp is Brian Asamoah, because year one, all right, there's no real expectation. It's not really going to get on the field a lot. They've got starters. But year two, there were expectations for Brian Asamoah because he had shown some flashes. And then we end up with him barely playing at all last year. In fact, this might be a little water cooler for you if you have a really big-time Viking fan friend at work, and you say, hey, you ready for training camp? Let me drop a stat on you. Do you realize that Anthony Barr played more defensive reps last year than Brian Asamoah, third-round pick in 2022? That was a shocker when I looked that up. I mean, I knew he wasn't out there much, but Anthony Barr, who showed up in the middle of last season, played more snaps than Brian Asamoah. Is that going to change? Or is he relegated with Grugier Hill to being only a special teams player? Does he have any trust at all from Brian Flores? Is he going to be second team, or are we going to see him on the fringe of this defense, which then dovetails into the other part of this, which is that there are a bunch of guys who could fight for jobs behind Kamu Grugier-Hill. And one of them is Abraham Beauplan, who has an amazing name, but is an absolute freak. In fact, was on the freaks list from Bruce Feldman. And feel free, by the way, to interrupt me at any time with questions in the comment section. For any of you watching, I'm going to run through these positions in hardcore fashion here. So stop me whenever you want with any questions or comments, and I'll get through the list of different players that are intriguing to me and the storylines. That's kind of how I'm going to do all these previews. And we'll have some guests and so forth next week. I was going to do this side of the ball tonight, maybe tomorrow night, jump into some offensive stuff, but we're getting very serious here now about training camp preview. So Abraham Beauplan is a guy who was on the team last year, got hurt in training camp, and they decided to bring back. Undersized, very, very strong, could be more of a special teamer. And then one guy that I am very, very interested in is a linebacker named Dallas Gant. Yes, this team has two guys with the name Dallas. So if both of them turn out to be awesome, there could be a run of children years from now that are named Dallas, but born in Minnesota, if they turn out to be that good. There's another thing to take to work with you. Anyway, Dallas Gant, who went to Toledo. This is a player to watch, because one thing I noticed is that Brian Flores has a profile of the types of players that he likes, or maybe this is in part a Kwesi Adofo-Mensah thing. College players who are underdogs, not highly rated necessarily, but highly productive. And that is Dallas Gant. He didn't have a blazing fast 40, but as far as his grades, he was the 6th highest graded college football linebacker last year, which immediately makes me wonder, all right, is this an Ivan Pace type of situation? And we're going to make that comparison a million times with UDFAs because it's right there. But at the same time, that was the profile of Pace as somebody who's highly productive, an instinctual player, and just didn't have necessarily the size speed combination that the NFL was looking for. And he turned out to be a huge player for them. So Dallas Gant is a guy to watch because of that. And then KJ Cloyd, can't really quite figure out on paper what they like there. Kind of bounced around, didn't play a lot of snaps for Miami, graded fairly highly as a run defender, but that was about it. So we'll see. We'll see on him. And those are the two main ones in the inside linebacker group to keep an eye on, I think. As far as the outside linebackers, or I guess Beauplan and Cloyd, maybe less, maybe more along the special teams lines, but Dallas Gant for sure. First name, last name. That's a great name on YouTube. Brian Asamoah has the same build as Pace. You can't really play two of those guys at the same time. I don't think that's quite right. Brian Asamoah is definitely thinner than Pace and taller, whereas Pace is a fire hydrant. And the big difference between them seems to be that Pace is a very violent player, and his height being low, he knows how to take advantage of it because he gets under the pads of guards. One thing I see all the time is, say you've got a pulling guard and here comes Ivan Pace to try to stick that guy and push him back into the running back. He will get very low and into that guard's pads. Well, you see the guard like leaning over, trying to get a block on him, and he can actually get leverage there. And I think with Pace, he is so strong. His weight is similar to linebackers who are much bigger than him, much taller than him. It's just that his height is not much, but that tells you if you got that, the thickness and the muscle and the strength, that you can overcome the height. I look at Asamoah more as a safety type of build where he's long and he's taller and he's thinner. And I think he's easier to block for offensive linemen because of that. And it also could be just how well you pick things up, because Ivan Pace appears to be a savant when it comes to picking this stuff up. He was already winning a job as a UDFA a few weeks into practice, which means that on the intellectual side, he must have been getting things very, very quickly. And I don't know if that's the same case with Brian Asamoah. Otherwise, they would have found a role for him, because it seems that everyone who can pick up, even Theo Jackson, something about Flores's defense, will end up getting an opportunity, and they'll find a place for you, but you have to be able to get it. Daniel, I'm getting to a couple of those outside linebackers now, and there's a lot of intriguing guys down the list. So there was your inside linebackers. The outside linebackers, Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, two huge signings for them. We've talked about those two players quite a bit. I was looking into the usage of Van Ginkel. Like, where did he line up? And I know it was a lot of different places, but what I found most interesting was that Van Ginkel 1 year lined up entirely on the left, 1 year lined up entirely on the right, and then another year split the reps. And Grenard, though, has been much more of a right outside linebacker, right defensive end. So I'm guessing that we're going to have Grenard on the right, Van Ginkel on the left. And where Dallas Turner fits into all of this is one of the things that we'll be watching closely during training camp. The expectations for Dallas Turner, considering his athleticism, considering his college production, how much they gave up to draft him, are very high, even though rookies, you never really know how they're going to adapt at the edge rusher position. But how much are they going to trust Dallas Turner in situations that aren't just third down? Are they going to have a true rotation where one guy comes out, one guy comes in? The fact that Turner played on both sides, does that make it easier? And when you look at Grenard's snap counts for his career, they've never really been that high. He had a good season that was limited in snaps 2 years ago. 2 years ago, he got banged up. 3 years ago, he had a good season in a limited number of snaps. And then last year, he was fantastic, but only in something like 400 pass rush snaps. And the top guys are getting much more like 500, 550 or more. The Myles Garrett, the TJ Watt, the every single down player. So there is an opportunity for Dallas Turner, if he can handle both sides of the defensive line, to rotate with either one of these guys. But Van Ginkel is capable of playing in multiple spots, which helps the flexibility, and it helps on the third down rushing or second down and long. I also think that you don't want to do too much of that, because he's also very good at just being a left outside linebacker and rushing the passer, which is what he did last year and really succeeded at it. So you have to maybe be delicate with how you deal with this rotation. It might just be, all right, this guy's going to get a rest. Dallas Turner's going to go in. He's going to play all three downs. Or it might be sub packages, and we'll try to get some sort of sense of that early on. I would guess that he would be in more sub packages to start, and then see where he's at and get him ramped up more and more. But a major storyline of training camp is, what does Dallas Turner look like? Is he disruptive right away? How's he look if he gets into those preseason games, which I imagine that he will? And where is he playing? Is he playing all over the place, or is he just more focusing on one spot? Because sometimes we fall into a little bit of the trap of just saying, well, Flores wants this player, so he's going to play him everywhere. But they don't do that with everyone. And Grenard is going to stay on that right outside linebacker spot all the time. I doubt he's going to move all over the place, because he hasn't really done that before. But Van Ginkel might be more of a static position as well, and that might not be a bad thing. But it all kind of depends on how far along Dallas Turner is, and that's what will determine how much they can do. What about Bob says, just let Turner loose, don't stifle him. He needs to learn how to be a pro just like any rookie, rotate a little bit at first. That's my guess is what he'll do. He is a very bright player, though, and he might be able to handle a lot right away, as there's very few defenses that you could make any comparison to the NFL from college. But if there's one, it's Alabama, it's Nick Saban, and Dallas Turner did a lot of different things. He dropped back in coverage, and I've seen him doing drills where he drops back in coverage and he moves his oily hips and he catches the ball, and he's very fluid when doing all of those things. So he could be this valuable tool that they mix and match, or they could say, here's what we're going to focus on first, and then we're going to build up. the different roles that you're going to play. And Flores' approach to Dallas Turner will be something that is very high on my list for the defensive line of the Vikings. So there's your three big names. Now, after that, this might be a party trick that you could tell people in your end of summer bonfires or something. Like, can you name the outside linebackers on the Minnesota Vikings that are not, and I know you guys can, but this is for your friends, that are not Dallas Turner, Andrew Van Ginkel, or Jonathan Grenard? Can you name these guys? It might be tough. Andre Carter and Patrick Jones right now are the two guys that I would have making the team, or I would be guessing are making the team. But these positions are so open. And I'm going to go through a few of the guys that have really caught my attention on paper. But Andre Carter has a chance to be the direct backup for these three. He last year showed enough to make the team out of training camp and then got in a little bit and had a pretty decent game against the Chargers early in the season. Did not make a ton of impact. After that, a handful of pressures, but he was a guy that was never supposed to play in year one. He was supposed to come back in year two, bigger, stronger, faster, get on an NFL regimen as opposed to being at Army and doing what they do at Army. Instead, putting all of his focus into the NFL. Now, I didn't look at him in minicamp and go, whoa, he is way bigger. But that might be hard to tell. Just from wandering around in his jersey and shorts and so forth. Let's see him when he actually gets out there and what he looks like and what type of role he's playing. Is he rotating into the first team a little? Is he entirely with the second? Does someone else beat him out? And there are lots of candidates to potentially beat him out. But if he takes the big step, his potential was very high coming out of college. He had some crazy 18 sack season or something like that. The year before he was drafted, his wingspan, his pedigree, his dad was in the NFL. I mean, he's, I think, a player with potential that we're watching, but it happens fast where someone else becomes the player with potential and passes you right by. So you don't always get forever to figure it out. So there's him and Patrick Jones, who 2 years ago in 2022 had his moments, but last year, the more he played, the more he got exposed. And he was rated last by PFF in grade for players who played more than 600 snaps. It was a tough assignment for him when DJ Wanham went down. He more likely thrives when he can just be in for a handful of snaps per game, kind of go all out, and that be really it for his role. They categorize players in this sort of way of how many snaps could this guy play before his play starts to fall off, before he just doesn't have enough to play 60, 70 snaps. It's what makes the greats truly great, is that every week they could come out and do it over and over and over and over again, whereas most players are good at one or two things, and it's better in small samples, and that might be the case for Patrick Jones, but he's never really shown a huge upside, which again opens the door for some extremely interesting outside linebackers. This is a position that, again, outside of quarterback, is way high on my list of things to watch. Evans says Van Ginkel hasn't practiced yet with the Vikings because of his foot injury. Do you know if he's expected to be back for training camp? That was my understanding, is that he would be back in time for camp, but I don't know if it's going to be day one or not. They don't have to release an injury report or even really give us specific timelines. So when we've asked O'Connell about injuries, it's mostly just been, yep, they're on schedule, they're doing well, they're going to be good to go, whatever kind of thing. Not really specific about Van Ginkel. Someone asked that at the end of training camp, and I don't recall coming away feeling like this could linger too far into training camp. You hope not, because if it does, then that player ends up getting behind almost no matter what. I mean, even Brian O'Neill last year, it wasn't easy for him early in the season after he had gone through the Achilles thing. So we'll see. That will be something to watch for very early on. Is Van Ginkel fully healthy and ready to go? If not right away, then how quickly can he get out there? But my belief from what they had said about his injury was that he should be back for training camp. So that's my expectation. Okay, so the outside linebackers who are fighting for position with Andre Carter and Patrick Jones, there's some fun stuff here. There's some stuff here that will make the preseason games worth keeping an eye on some of these players. Number one is Gabriel Murphy from UCLA. You may have heard a little bit about him already, but when I was reviewing his production, it was truly excellent last year. I mean, 8 sacks, 61 pressures, which was 7th in all of FBS. He was all Pac-12 honorable mention. And the reason he went undrafted, it seems, just from my research, and there might be more to the story, is that, like me, doesn't have very long arms. Look at these things. These can't play defensive end, and these are about the same size as Gabriel Murphy's arms. That does not help as an edge rusher. I also think that one thing Brian Flores is very good at is looking at a player who doesn't have perfectly ideal measurables, and we've seen this numerous times, and making something there from that player by finding them a specific role. And what my understanding is about Gabriel Murphy, from watching him a little bit at UCLA and looking at a little bit of his tape when he got picked up as a UDFA, is that he seems to be a very technically mature pass rusher, a lot of different types of moves, seems to understand and have a plan of how it's supposed to work with pass rushing. That could fit in quite nicely with the Vikings, and he's going to be battling with other guys who don't have their spots filled. So Gabriel Murphy has, I think, a legitimate chance to make this team if he brings over from college that proficiency in the technical part of pass rushing, because he's not going to run by people. 4.68, 40, not that fast, doesn't have the long arm that he could just put out and stuff somebody with. So he's going to have some work to do there, but is a very interesting player. Daniel says, anyone see KOC on Netflix series Cussing Up a Storm? Yeah. Well, look, Kevin O'Connell is a football coach. I would expect that would be the case. And last year he was extremely upset about the fumbles because he knew they could have won games, especially against Tampa Bay. But even against Philadelphia early in the year, they fumble the punt return from Brandon Powell. Jefferson throws it out of the back of the end zone in the fumble. They get strip sacked. And last year at the beginning of the season could have been quite a bit different. And I think he knew that. And it really shaped the way the season played out at that time. So but that was interesting to see. That's football, man. You fumble a couple of times and lose games like that, the coach is not going to be very happy. Now, what I would have really loved to hear is some of Zimmer's rants, because I would guess KOC's was maybe a 3 out of 10 in comparison to what Mike Zimmer might have said under the same circumstances. What about Bob says, is healthy Cam Akers an automatic number 2 or still Chandler? Leaning Chandler number 2, but Cam can ball. We've got to figure out where Cam Akers is health-wise after tearing the Achilles again. It's going to be hard to get up to full speed. Middle of the season Achilles tear, not easy. The week after Kirk Cousins, to me, it's Ty Chandler easily as running back number 2. He was way more effective than Cam Akers, but they just don't have very much depth at that position, because after that, it's Myles Gaskin aside from Akers, and Akers knows the system. And I think he did fit in quite well, and he had some good runs, but overall, what did he average? Like 3 yards a carry or something like that, where Chandler has a real explosiveness to him that is not easy to find. Maybe some of the other parts, the pass protection, it might never come around. But if you're looking for somebody to get the ball in their hands and make something happen, Ty Chandler is more likely to do that than Cam Akers is. So back to the outside linebackers. Jihad Ward is a veteran that they brought in who, to tell you the truth, on paper has never been good. He has played a lot of snaps in the NFL for 5 different teams. He has 18 career sacks. His career high is only 25 pressures, and he's had starter level snaps. He's kind of like a Patrick Jones, who has just been a guy in the league, bounced around, played for a lot of different teams, and has never really made good on that second round draft status. They might feel like they've got something for him, some specific way of rushing or role. And one of the things that I did notice on paper with him, looking at his PFF statistics, was A few years ago, he played for Baltimore in more of a limited role as opposed to a starter where he was with the Giants, and his numbers were better. His pressure rate was better. His pass rush win rate might be somebody that they work in as a veteran backup because, as I mentioned, with someone like Andre Carter, someone like Gabriel Murphy, we're talking about guys that are just not very experienced, and they might want a little more experience here with Jihad Ward. So a player to keep an eye on if he's getting opportunities with the second team, if he looks like somebody that they want, or if it's the younger guys that are passing him by. Preston says, any info on JJ McCarthy contract status? I have not heard anything new. The rookies are supposed to report in 6 days, I believe. So get it done. They've just got to get it done. And if that comes down to giving JJ McCarthy a little bit more on the side of guaranteed money than they want to, giving him all the guaranteed money like other quarterbacks have got, just do it. He has to be here. He has to be here on day one. They shouldn't be messing around with this. Similar to Justin Jefferson, they may have paid a couple extra $1 million to make sure that they're not messing around. And the same thing should go for JJ McCarthy. Just get it done. And if it sets a bad precedent for the future, sorry, but it's going to need to get done so he can be here as soon as possible. That's the way I view that. I don't start panicking about things, as you guys know, until I have to. And so at this moment, I'm just thinking, okay, well, we'll see. Cade says those reports of him wanting guaranteed is legit. Has that ever been done? I don't know if it's legit, but has it been done? Yeah, quite a bit. Commonly. It's become common, especially for quarterbacks, that they get the guaranteed money up front. Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, I believe. There was a whole list somebody had of quarterbacks who have gotten all their guaranteed money up front. The Vikings have not done this in the past, from my understanding, but it's something that does happen around the league. Even going back, this is what Joey Bosa was holding out for in his first training camp and fighting for. It's the only really battleground in these rookie contracts, and both sides just got to get it done. And if the Vikings have to give it to him, then give it to him, because other quarterbacks are getting it, and you need him here as fast as possible. But yeah, it's not, if he's asking for that, if that report is true, or I guess I should call it a rumor if we can't say that it was Adam Schefter or Albert Breer or somebody that we actually know who runs the Twitter account. So that rumor, I would just say, let's wait and see what happens here and how it plays out. But if that rumor does turn out to be correct, then it's not some crazy thing that JJ McCarthy's side would be asking for. What about Bob says, does Ryan Wright make the team or keep his job? I could see him losing his job. Yeah. He definitely slendered up. You'll notice this in the preseason games that Ryan Wright has gotten in better shape than he was last year. But I don't know if that impacts how far the ball travels or not. I don't know. Is this like you wouldn't want Prince Fielder to lose too much weight? I'm not really sure if that makes a difference or not, because sometimes skinny guys punt the heck out of the ball. But the other punter, that's Seth Vernon is the other punter, looks like a really good athlete, played wide receiver a little bit in college and might have just as good of a leg. It will come down to the precision of it, not just how far you kick it, but also the accuracy of it, the hang time, trying to time it out with the coverage. And what Ryan Wright really struggled with was if they got to the midfield mark and they had to punt, so you're punting from maybe your own 40 or something, he was just kicking out of the end zone constantly or shanking it. And it was that touch that was lacking, not the power, but really the touch in his game that was lacking. George says Aaron Jones needs to stay healthy to be the running back, to get the yard or two when they need to move the sticks and extend drives. KOC way too soft with pass plays that oftentimes failed. Oh yeah, I agree with you that probably trust was a big part of that. Rather than maybe being soft, it was just, do I believe in my interior offensive line and do I believe in my running back to convert 3rd and 2? And with Aaron Jones, you do. With Alexander Mattison, maybe not. And I saw it circling the internet how little success they had when running at the goal line with Alexander Mattison. And that goes for both the line and Mattison, but he was not that power type of player that he had been in the past. But Aaron Jones is so shifty and so smart and so crafty and tough that I think they'll lean on him more in those short yardage situations. But there were definitely times where you're throwing on 3rd and 8, or I'm sorry, 3rd and 2, a 14-yard pass down the sideline or something with Josh Dobbs. What are we doing here? Like, that's just not what you need in this situation. You need a 2-yard run, but they had lost the trust, it felt like, in Madison, to where they were just pushing the pass button over and over and over and over again. Blood Eagle Smeagol says, too soon to ask if we will sign a veteran corner. Well, I'll say this, that does feel inappropriate, yes, but it was a discussion beforehand, before what happened with Kyrie Jackson. So I will not say that you're being inappropriate for asking that question. I don't think it's necessary. I really don't. I saw someone bring up Xavier Howard's name, and I might want to Google that, because Xavier Howard is in some legal trouble that I think would make you want to stay away from him at this moment, unless you want to do what Pittsburgh just did with Cam Sutton and then the guy gets suspended. But Xavier Howard, older side, banged up, legal trouble. I'm going to pass on that. I could see where Stephon Gilmore might still have something in the tank, but I would just rather they play Byron Murphy, see if they want to extend him for next year. Mekhi Blackmon, who I like a lot and I think deserves the opportunity. And then Shaq Griffin, another guy that if he plays well, they could extend him and keep him here because he's not old, if that works out. I would prefer to see those guys play. Maybe as a backup, there's someone that they can pick up, but I think that they're still okay at that position. Maybe they will add one person or something, one veteran, but they don't have to go out and get somebody who's washed or this goes for all the veteran free agents that during the summer, everyone always wants to sign these guys who are still around, but how often is that guy like Hunter Renfrow a good signing? It just doesn't seem like that would be a good idea. Jason says Bleacher Report talked about Marshawn Lattimore from the Saints. Is that a really short-term deal? And he's also had injuries and so forth, right? I think that I would just prefer to see them play it out with their guys who are in their prime or younger and figure out who they're going to go forward with, rather than trading for an older player who's had injuries, even if he's good. That's something that Kansas City would do. That's something that Buffalo would do. A team that is in the top 5 for odds to win the Super Bowl. Then you go out and try to get that veteran player who might only have 1 year left of being good. Lattimore is 28, but is he 28 or 28 going on 35 with his body? I just feel like Marshawn Lattimore has been hurt a lot. You can correct me. You can look it up because I feel like, and this is a good point from Cade, cornerback primes are very short. And a lot of times by 28, 29, 30, if they've been really good early in their career, they're not the same guy by then. And maybe he's better than I remember because I don't have that right in front of me. And if he could be good for multiple years, then great. But I just feel like that sort of train has passed with Marshawn Lattimore. If you're talking about trading him for a 2025 fifth or something, if they even have one, I don't know what their draft capital is right now. They've given away a lot of it. But I guess I would just rather see healthier, younger players play it out. And if it results in some struggles, then it results in some struggles, rather than getting someone who's older to take up a spot that's not going to be part of what you're going to do in the future. I need to learn about Mekhi Blackmon. I need to see if Shaq Griffin could be a multi-year player. I need to see if Byron Murphy is a long-term extension type player or someone that needs to be replaced. Let me find those things out. And maybe if you had another depth guy. The other thing is too, sometimes with this team and with Brian Flores, you think, that's a weakness. You need to get another guy. And then somebody like Ivan Pace emerges or Josh Metellus, and you go, oh, actually that guy, this younger guy that they identified and wouldn't have been there if not for an opportunity. So let me swing back, keep asking your questions. Totally fine. I'm enjoying answering them, but let me swing back to where we were with the defensive line and the outside linebackers. So I talked about Jihad Ward, two guys that really caught my eye because of their production. One of them, Owen Porter from Marshall, 2 years ago, he had 52 pressures and did 30 bench reps at his pro day, which is a lot for an edge rusher. And total over the last 2 seasons, 18 and a half sacks at Marshall. So a very productive player, once again, from a lesser school. It's not Alabama, it's not Georgia, but somebody who put up a lot of numbers as a pass rusher. And then one of those very interesting guys, Bo Richter, who is from Air Force, had 0 sacks in 2022, and then 10 sacks last year. And in total pressures for last season, and I know it's not quite the same level of competition, but he ranked right behind Dallas Turner. Bo Richter did. And then at his pro day, as far as his relative athletic score, it was through the roof, 99th percentile. He ran a 4.5 40. This is a very interesting player from Air Force that the Vikings are bringing in. I believe he was banged up in minicamp, so I don't think we saw a lot of him. But if he's healthy for training camp, Bo Richter would be exactly the type of guy that would just become Mr. Mankato. That's why we have it, right? Because of players like Bo Richter. So there's your linebacker group, inside and outside. A lot of storylines here. The biggest, I think, are, can any undrafted free agent step up and take one of these backup spots? Because they've got a lot of guys who could potentially do it, and there's a lot of opportunity for those guys to potentially do it. And where does Dallas Turner fit in? Oh, camera unplugged. Sorry about that. Hold on. Let me plug it back in. There we go. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. My AC is broken. It's very hot down here. So my face is red and I'm sweating. And I'm talking football, so I'm sweating anyway. And I think the camera overheats sometimes. So anyway, but where Dallas Turner fits in, the UDFAs, can Andre Carter hold some of these guys off? What an interesting position group in the front seven. So I want to get to the defensive line in a second, but let me circle back and answer some of your questions. From first name, last name, what about the UDFA corner McGlothern? Does he have a shot to do anything? Yeah, I think so. When it comes to minicamp, though, it does get hard to figure out. Oh, gosh, camera again. Well, just stick with me here. It does get hard to figure out when it comes to minicamp whether those guys can actually carry it over to playing with pads. Like that's the hardest thing, is can they play with pads? Because playing in shorts, it's not that hard. The physical part of playing corner is really the most difficult, right? Is when you're getting beat up all the time by really good wide receivers like. And that is the toughest part. So he looked pretty good in mini camp, and he got some reps as it went along. And then we'll see where it goes from there. But again, there will be opportunity, I think, all over with this team in order for some UDFAs to actually make it. And they seem to really like giving these younger players chances, and where they're at right now, they should, right? They should like giving these players chances with this roster, because they're not a team that is established at all these different positions. Okay, so we'll get the camera back working in just a second. I have a backup camera that I can plug in if this continues to overheat. So I appreciate you guys sticking with. Okay, Scott says on Kevin O'Connell, where does the K come from? Oh, guessing K could be. Well, I'm sorry, I don't really understand a liability in the new. Oh, I see. On the kickoff. See, when you say KO, I think Kevin O'Connell. On the kickoff, I see the kicker could be a liability in the new format. All 11 need to tackle. No, you're right about that. And that's why I do wonder if Kamu Grugier-Hill ends up being somebody who they consider having kickoff, because he's done that before in the NFL, which is pretty rare, but they do have a linebacker who's kicked off before. And I would guess that they're just going to try to figure this out in terms of stuffing certain areas like you do on defense, certain areas taking up gaps, and then having players try to shoot through those gaps and make plays. My worry is that teams are going to squib it, and it does have to land in a landing area, but if it lands in that area and bounces around, that's still legal. So is that how they're going to do it, is to try to squib it into this legal landing area? I think there's a halfway decent chance that ends up happening for a lot of teams, that they just end up not really kicking it off, but turning it into, hey, there, I'm back. Turning it into some sort of like chase the ball around, like Rocky with the chicken. Here, we're going to kick it off, go chase it around. So we'll see about that. I'm sure that you guys enjoyed more not looking at me. So here I am, but I'm back. Thank you to my camera. Okay, from Sandaro J, excited about the pass rush with Grenard Turner. What's the learning curve for edge rushers? Definitely varies. We've seen some edge rushers come in and play really well right away, but historically, edge rushers don't get a million sacks right away, except for a handful of guys really ever. So my expectation is not incredibly high for Dallas Turner. If he were to get, think about Will Anderson last year. All you heard about was how great Will Anderson was. I believe he had 7 sacks. I mean, that's just how high the standard is for these guys at edge rusher and how challenging it is to come in right away and get double-digit sacks. But if he can get 6 to 8, get pressures, play a fairly significant role, play 500 snaps. I did look this up, and there were only maybe 3 or 4 guys all of last year who were rookies that played over 500 snaps. So again, that tells the story that it is a position that takes a lot of technique, a lot of development, and is not super easy to just jump into the NFL. But usually by year 2, that's when they take their big step. So I think you should set the bar reasonably at, say, 5 to 7 sacks, 500 snaps, and a decent pressure rate. That's what you're looking for Dallas Turner. And if it's more than that, it's special. If he gets to 7 sacks, that list of players who get to 7 sacks or more is usually pretty short in the NFL for that position. And this is why we talk about, and the Vikings aren't doing this now, but when you try to draft players to save a particular season, oh, we got to fill this role for next year with this player that we're drafting. It's not something you should really do, because rookies are hard to predict and they take time to develop. So the Vikings getting Van Ginkel and Grenard, they don't have to rely entirely on Dallas Turner. That's a good thing for them. Evan says, if we signed a linebacker last year, Ivan may have not got the opportunity to emerge. Want to see this roster play out. Maybe sign Connor Williams if our interior offensive line sucks and he's healthy. I completely agree with that. Last year, we saw 2 guys that they could have signed those positions. They could have signed another cornerback and just thrown him into that Metellus spot, or another safety that was a veteran and more proven, or a linebacker, whatever he's supposed to be. And they instead, so let's go with this. Let's go with this. We'll see how it works out. And it paid off. Let's go with Ivan Pace Jr. and have a competition there and see if it pays off. Now, it doesn't always, but this is a year to take the risk that it doesn't, right? If it doesn't work out with giving the cornerbacks a shot or getting the backup edge rushers a shot, and they didn't go out and get more veterans, or the wide receivers, that's okay. It's not the end of the world for this season. I'm not saying they should throw this season away, but it's important to find out what you have, because as you mentioned, you want to know which young players can eventually be core to your team, like Ivan Pace, because that's gold for you. I mean, think about what Ivan Pace is going to make the next few years versus a player who's similar that was a veteran that you signed in free agency. That it would cost a ton. But instead, you have him on his rookie contract. It's a rookie free agent contract, and it plays out much better for your team building. So if they can have someone emerge from the back end of the cornerback group, from the back end of the edge rusher group, to be a situational player and not have to go sign Yannick Ngakoue or something, they're going to be better off. Hunter says, I think the Vikings need draft picks and undrafted free agents to work out for depth. Otherwise, it will be tough. And you are exactly right. The edge rusher position, I'm going to get to the defensive line as well. The edge rusher position is great evidence of that, because if Jihad Ward is your only guy that is really a veteran backup there, that's not great if the other UDFAs and rookies don't shine, or Andre Carter, a second-year player, and Patrick Jones is kind of a veteran-ish. Like, he's played, but he's still somebody that's on the younger and inexperienced side. It's not like a Brian Robinson, who was once upon a time their rotational edge rusher. they need some of these guys, and they're taking this approach of giving a lot of them opportunities who have had college production and saying, all right, we're going to roll the ball out. Somebody make it work. And it doesn't always. It doesn't always. Let's see. Check the drain pan. Might be clogged. Oh, okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's for my AC because it's running. The fan is running, but no cold air is coming out. And maybe it is the drain pan. You're right, Horse Feathers, that the AC goes out just when you need it. It's been a very cool summer up to this point. My AC goes out right when it's time to be 90 degrees toward this weekend. Oh, yeah. Yes, you're right, Ken. It could be on the porch or a park. We might have to be permanent porch podcasting if the AC doesn't get fixed here because I am toasty right now. Scott says Liz Frank injury, no joke that Van Ginkel could start on the PUP list. We'll see. Yeah, it is. It is a serious injury. We just don't have a definitive timeline. I got the sense that they hoped he was going to be back for training camp. Sometimes, as you mentioned, it does take a little bit longer. Some of these injuries that you have off-season surgery, the timelines are not always perfect for every player. That was with Latavius Murray in 2017, where he got off to that slow start because he had the injury that kept him out of camp at the beginning of the year. It's something to watch, just how far along he is. Let's talk about defensive linemen. Let's talk about some fat people. Harrison Phillips last year, I felt was asked to do too much. And when we asked him about this, it was an interesting answer because he said, of course, I want to be out on the field every single play. But there were times that I felt like if I had a little more in the tank, that I could have made that tackle, gotten to that quarterback. And it actually shows up in the data, which I think is sort of pairing the player's commentary with my general sense with the factual element of it, which is what I try to do. He went from being graded a 72.1 by PFF, which is pretty solid in 2022, to a 59.7, and his missed tackles jumped up by 3 times what they were in 2022. And he played 838 snaps, which is crazy for a guy that had never really played when he signed here more than 500 and then became an every single down type of player. It was too much to ask for Harrison Phillips, which means that everybody else now has to be a part of a rotation to take pressure off of Harrison Phillips, because in the right role, he is an above average player at that spot, but it's got to be the right role, which was what he had in 2022. I thought he was quite good, but 2023, way too much, saying go out there and handle 60 snaps every single game. That's just too much for him. And he was paired with Jonathan Bullard, who was a career backup who also played way too much. Last year, Jonathan Bullard had not seen over 400 snaps since 2017, and he played 643. So think about that. His most snaps was 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, or 7 years ago, however long ago that is, six years. And then he plays double what he had been playing in recent years. And as you would expect, as the season wore on, those PFF grades went down and down and down because he got worn out. Some players are just fit to be rotational guys, situational guys, and Jonathan Bullard, I think, is one of those, which means that it is on the shoulders of a bunch of different players to fill these roles in a rotation. But who will it be is the big training camp question. There is a big battle at defensive line behind, and I really think Phillips and Bullard are solidified. They like Jonathan Bullard. Phillips is a guy they pay a decent amount of money, a leader on the team. Past that, nobody is locked in. Nobody. The next guy that I have is Jerry Tillery, who was a little bit interesting last year. He was a situational rusher for the Vegas Raiders after being a bust with the Los Angeles Chargers, but then showed some flashes last year, had 29 quarterback pressures and 283 snaps, which is not too bad, and was almost exclusively used as a situational rusher, as a second and long, third and long. PFF has a stat for that that's called true pass sets, which is, it's not play action, it's not a screen. So how often are you just straight up chasing the passer? And he was in the top 35 in the league at that, which isn't too bad, which could be a contributor and a rotational player. So Tillery's somebody to watch. Does he end up with a starting job outside of Harrison Phillips? Jonah Williams was a player they signed in the offseason, run stuffer-ish, kind of a guy that's just hung around in the league, ranked 54th out of 73, not much of a difference maker, $1 million contract. So he's somebody that if nobody comes and takes his job, he'll have it. But really, they're saying, someone come take this guy's job, right? I would guess. More of a run stopper, didn't get a lot of success rushing the passer. Now here's two guys that are coming for the backup job, which is Jaquelin Roy and Levi Drake Rodriguez. Jaquelin Roy last year in training camp caught my eye numerous times. Powerful, powerful hands, strong guys, big, but he got beat up a little bit last year. He had some serious flashes. I remember in the Atlanta game, he had several plays where he created penetration, got into the backfield, but it wasn't consistent when he got in. And ultimately, he did not play a lot of snaps, 95 total snaps last season. So a little bit of flash, but not super impressive. Fifth rounder that's supposed to have a fairly high ceiling. We'll see. He's got a chance to play a lot if he emerges in this training camp. And Levi Drake Rodriguez, we're talking about a guy who comes from Texas A&M Commerce. So my expectation is not super high that in his first training camp, he's going to blow everybody away. But he might. He has the athleticism, the strength, the speed, the quickness to give himself a chance to create a role. Jaquelin Roy has more of a shot, but Levi Drake Rodriguez will be another player that everybody's watching throughout this training camp. Blood Eagle Smeagol says, are there any noteworthy zero techs available? We definitely need run support. I don't think so. I think when you look at free agency at this point, I haven't checked the nose tackles, the nose guards. Usually if you're good at that, that is such a tough position to find. Someone who's actually an impact player at nose tackle. And they had Kairos Tonga, who was that humongous 325-pound guy. They just didn't really seem to like him as a fit for Brian Flores' defense. With Ed Donatel, he played pretty well, and he actually got after the passer a bit. But Flores really takes it seriously. I think let me throw this out there. Prepare yourself for something very football-y. The gap integrity. I think he really cares about using his big guys up front to create space for his rushers. So you might be Harrison Phillips or Jonathan Bullard. You're not getting a quarterback pressure, but you are turning your guy. You are pushing your guy in one way to create room for Ivan Pace, and you don't really notice that person doing that job. Whereas if the defensive lineman isn't good at that, but maybe has a little bit more pressures because he just goes rogue and goes after the quarterback or doesn't take his role as seriously. I'm not saying that's what happened, but that does happen. That it's kind of, are you a guy that does your job? And Flores mentioned multiple times that there were players who didn't get enough shine because they weren't getting any of those numbers. That might determine who's a better fit. But yes, Levi Drake Rodriguez, clearly the next John Randall. It's obvious that that's what he's going to be. And sorry about the camera again. He's clearly going to be the next John Randall. No question about it. Just because he came from a small college in Texas, and every person who comes from a small college in Texas is John Randall. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull out the backup camera here because I've got more defensive linemen to get to. So just give me a moment. Okay. Sorry, guys. Yeah, we're back. We're back. Sorry about that. I am going to have the backup camera regularly ready. Now, this camera, you can really see how sweaty it's making me down here, but I think my camera just overheated, but you can kind of see me now. So I'll continue to go through where we were. And yeah, this is the Josh Dobbs camera. Yeah, I know. Can you see? I mean, you can really see it with this. This is a little bit of a closer viewpoint, and I'm definitely hot down here. So hopefully tomorrow we can get the AC fixed and we won't have this issue anymore, but I'm pretty sure my camera just overheated. So sorry about that. Okay, the Packers are doing this. Yep, that's right. They're trying to keep me away from analyzing the defensive line. That's the trouble. Um, Selling McCarthyism, says McCarthy. Hall in year one, QB3. I don't know yet. We're gonna find out. It has happened before that someone who's drafted and they want to sit for a year becomes not the backup right away. So that would be somebody like Jordan Love that sat for a year and Tim Boyle was the backup. But I would be pretty surprised. I think by the end of training camp, he'll be QB2, just based on his work ethic and the way that he seemed to be starting to pick things up by the end of minicamp. It wouldn't even be totally shocking if he won the job. I don't think that he will. I think it's going to be Sam Darnold. But would you be blown away if he won the job? No. And if he didn't start QB3, it's not time to panic. I know you're selling McCarthyism because that's your YouTube name, but it's not time to panic if they're going to truly give him that space to develop. We'll see. I mean, that's the number one storyline of camp, hands down, is just how far can JJ McCarthy come along. So back to the defensive linemen, and let me get through a couple of these players who are going to be fighting for spots. So by far, Jaquelin Roy and Levi Drake Rodriguez are the most interesting, but James Lynch is coming back from an ACL tear. And in 2022, he was actually pretty solid as a run defender. And I am really intrigued by the idea of Flores working with him because when he was in college, he was a 5 technique. And, that's playing over the tackle, not way outside, not way inside. And he had very good production at Baylor. And then the Vikings immediately moved him to 3 tech. And then they tried to move him into nose tackle and have him put on a bunch of weight. And that's where he was in 2022. Now he's going to have more of an opportunity to carve out a role with a defensive mind that might be good at this, of figuring out what players do best. And we're going to see how he looks coming back from that ACL. He has a chance, though, to make the team. They must have brought him back for a reason. So he's an intriguing guy. The other players on the team, maybe less of a chance here. Tyler Manoa, a big, large man, 6'5", 315. Jalen Redmond, a UDFA guy. And Taki Taimani, I believe is how it is pronounced. Kind of a fire hydrant guy at 6 foot and 310 pounds. Went to Oregon, successful run stopper. So there's not a lot behind all of those guys. It's not as deep of a position as the edge rushers, but you still have James Lynch, Levi Drake Rodriguez, Jaquelin Roy, Jonah Williams, Jerry Tillery, all jockeying for position. So this is, yes, you're right, Horse Feathers, that this does show how much better the other camera makes me look than this. So it is the magic of paying a little bit more for the better camera that overheats when it gets hot down here. So, but whatever, this is good enough. We're talking football. We're all good. You didn't come here just to look at this, did you? You came here to hear about defensive tackles. But that solidifies pretty much the front 7. And the biggest storylines, I think, at the defensive tackle position is really just, how do they manage this rotation? And does someone like Jaquelin Roy or Levi Drake Rodriguez surprise us and take some sort of role? Or does Jerry Tillery surprise us? Because Jerry Tillery might be one of those players that was drafted high based on his skills, then has it click in and become a good, significant role player for them. That's what they're looking for. And that's why Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has gone out and gotten players who were drafted fairly high and brought them in, just with that hope that somebody clicks. And eventually that won't be a very good strategy. But for right now, I think it is a good strategy. And the Chiefs and the other teams do it. And it doesn't work that often, but every once in a while, someone like Jerry Tillery works out. So he'll be one to keep an eye on as we go through training camp. So I guess my question for you before we wrap up, and you're right, Preston, I need to get a fan down here, get a little air circulating. Normally it's actually colder down here in the basement because I've got the AC vents right here. But if the AC isn't running, then it's hotter down here. So anyway, there's my house. There's lots of house problems. Building a new garage, getting new windows, AC breaks. That's just always the thing. So final thoughts though, How would you guys grade the Vikings front seven overall? If you were to give it A, B, C, D, how would you grade it? What would you evaluate it at? Because I think for me, it's probably a B, like a solid B. The defensive tackle position still has a lot of questions. The depth at linebacker is not good, and Blake Cashman has had injuries in the past. If they play he and Ivan Pace at their peak, they could be phenomenal, but there is injuries there. And with the edge rushers, the same thing goes. If it's the best version of Jonathan Grenard, if it's the best version of Andrew Van Ginkel, then both of them can be extremely good. But are they going to play 700 snaps or more when they haven't really done that in the past? And then for Dallas Turner, the peak version of Dallas Turner, someone who is drafted really high, and his athleticism and his intelligence could be an A+ draft pick by the end of the year. But we don't know that right now. We're just trying to project maybe a median outcome for Dallas Turner. And I think you guys are exactly where I am with this. Blood Eagle, you've got a B-. And Evan says a B- with an upside of B+. I would agree with that. There's just not enough upside when it comes to the defensive tackle position. There's almost no one there that you could say, oh, well, if it works for this guy, he's going to be phenomenal. Even with someone like Tillery, we're talking about, could he be a fairly effective rotational rusher inside? But the ceiling is not a big superstar. James says a B. They're missing a tackle and linebacker depth is one of the easiest things to find. I think it's an A for fielding a roster that's competitive. Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. And one that has potential going forward. They need more depth at linebacker. They need more interior players who could create pressure, or at least even just be well above average as run stoppers. I don't think that, I think Harrison Phillips is above average, but maybe not a Vita Vea super impact player. So that needs a lot of work and will be one of their biggest priorities when they go into 2025. And when I did the free agency simulation, or whatever I called it, way too early free agency preview of 2025, that was one of the biggest things I was looking for, is who could be a difference maker on the interior of the defensive line. And that's got to be overall one of the worst groups in the league on paper. You would probably put them in the bottom 10, if not bottom 5. So even if you have the edge rushing group in the top 10, and even if you have the linebacker pair in the top 10, it's still going to bring it down into the B range for me. James says, I think it's a great for a roster that can be evaluated and filled out or pivoted from after a year. The question marks aren't super risky or invested in. But well said. I 100% agree with you on everything you said there. That's exactly right. What they've done is they've created a roster with some very good players at the top of these positions, including Harrison Phillips, but Grenard, Van Ginkel, Turner, Pace, Cashman, these are very good players. Some of them proven, some of them still proving themselves as excellent players. But nonetheless, there's a good amount of talent there. One level down, it's all unproven, but it's also not a lot of investment. And there's a lot of darts that are being thrown at the board. A lot of UDFAs who had production in college, a lot of players that they seem to like and have drafted in the later rounds, like Levi Drake Rodriguez, like Jaquelin Roy. They're going to throw the footballs out there. You guys fight for them. Go get them. Go steal those jobs. And if they don't, then they know exactly where to spend the money for next year. Feels like good roster management to me. So what's the grade for no depth? Yeah, no depth at the moment. This is why we have training camp, because at the end of training camp, we might say, wow, that's actually more depth than we thought, because this guy and this guy and this guy had a good camp. Or we could be saying, oh man, if anybody gets hurt, this is going to be a major problem. And again, that's why we cover camp, because that question could be a huge determining factor of how far they can go with this team. If they have no depth, then it's going to be 2020 or 2021 all over again. If they have players like Ivan Pace become the new Ivan Pace, then it might not be, and they'll have more depth than they had before. A very interesting position to watch for the second team, the third team. The preseason games are going to have a lot of juice, because so many of these guys are jockeying for any type of role behind these starters. And as usual, we're not going to see much of the starters in preseason, but we will see a lot of players who might eventually have something to do with this team. So anyway, yeah, they could, Preston, they could pick up guys that are, drops from other teams. You don't see a lot of that. Usually teams are pretty good at evaluating these players. Maybe you grab some guy who gets chopped, but I think that they want to give these players as much opportunity as they can. Ken, C plus or C, they don't have all three levels. No, that's true. But if you're well above average at two of them and well below average at one of them, I suppose you could go C plus. B minus, C plus is fair with the potential to be better than that if some players do emerge. James, do you think it's easier or harder to fill certain positions with cap space versus high draft picks? Which one does defensive tackle fit into? Well, I think defensive tackle fits into, you have to use a high draft pick on it most of the time. There are guys that do become available. We saw Christian Wilkins and DJ Reader both get signed last year because the prices are going up and up. Javon Hargrave the year before, right? Yeah, Javon Hargrave for San Francisco. So there are every year a handful of really high quality free agent defensive tackles. Most of the time, though, they cost a lot of freaking money, which is why it's a good position to spend a top draft pick on, because the league has realized the Christian Wilkins is just hard to find. And the Vikings have struggled and struggled and struggled since Linval Joseph and even Tom Johnson to find anybody that could be really effective at that position. So I think that if we're looking at where that first round pick is going to get spent next year, the defensive tackle goes to the top of the list. Also, naturally, cornerback would be another spot that's not easy to find. Yeah, Scott, you're right that if he does turn out to be Levi Drake Randall and is the same as John Randall, then yes, that would be an A+. It would be an A+ group if they end up with John Randall. But I don't think that it's unfair to call it a C+ or a B- group right now, with potential to be more than that. And if it ends up at the end of the year where we look back and go, yeah, that was probably a C+, that means a lot of money and draft capital need to be put into it, because you're not getting deep in the playoffs without a great defensive line. I fully believe that, unless you have an unbelievable offense and really, really great coverage. But most of the time you need impact players on the defensive line, like the Eagles have, like San Francisco has. That's what the Vikings should be trying to do. And they spent a lot on this front seven, but there's still more work there. Or you could get to the end of the season and go, that Dallas Gant guy, never saw it coming, right? Or whoever, Bo Richter, a star, undrafted free agent. I can't believe it. Or Levi Drake Randall. It could happen. And it has from time to time. You just can't really project that right now. But defensive tackle is something that, this is a good point, Blood Eagle, that, or the Vikings. So defensive tackle is a position you should have. And historically they have. And it's just that these last few years, they've struggled to really find that guy. Delvin Tomlinson was a good player, effective at what he did, but he wasn't a serious difference maker where you look back at the tape and go, oh my gosh, that guy was a game wrecker. That they have not had since Linval Joseph. Probably in 2017 was his best by far, but even in 2018 was still good. 2019 still good. Still a difference-making defensive tackle, one of the better ones in the league. They just haven't had it since he left, and you can really see where that comes into play. So that position is going to be hard to fix in a year unless suddenly someone shows up and proves that they could do more than someone like Jonathan Bullard, for example. But I think they're improved. Last year, you might have had a case that they were the worst in the league at that position. Probably improved with Jerry Tillery if Jonah Williams has to play, some of these guys that they take a shot at. But the overall front seven, I think, would be maybe in the middle of the league overall. You'd put them 14th in the NFL to 16th, somewhere there. And they're going to need better than that to compete for a Super Bowl, or they're going to need the edge rushers to get 15 sacks each or something like that, which probably isn't going to happen. But capable enough for Brian Flores to work with, though, and still create a decent amount of pressure, I think. So anyway, well, I appreciate you guys' patience with the both my sweating and the camera issue. I'll have the backup camera on hand always going into the future. But I was thinking about maybe another live broadcast tomorrow, even to start talking some more, maybe a little later into the evening, to talk some more training camp previews. We went through the front seven, maybe look at the offensive line, running backs, couple of positions for tomorrow. I'm writing about these over at purpleinsider.com. So make sure you go check out the articles as well. And we will talk to y'all probably tomorrow night, I'm thinking. And then next week, we really get into it. Hoping to have a few guests, a couple of porch podcasts. Supposed to be really nice weather. So we march forward toward training camp. I appreciate all you guys popping in, asking great questions. Very entertaining chat with y'all. So thanks so much. And we'll see you tomorrow night. Football.